Hey, welcome back. You have found us again. It's another VO podcast right here on the podcast airwaves, coming to you live from Zencaster from all different places in the world. Let's see. Alden, where are you at again?
I'm in Missouri. Near
No, it's
Kansas City.
Indiana. You're wrong
Whatever.
answer. Jake, where are you?
I would say Texas, but I'm worried that's wrong too now.
No, you're right. You're out there close to Cliff, so I know where you are. It's Alden. I always get messed up.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a really special guest today. Let's welcome Lynn Wissner. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm from Los Angeles. Yay!
Yes. And we will absolutely believe you because I know that's where you are.
Yeah,
That's just awesome.
I'm a native.
Awesome.
I'm a native, so that's actually
really?
kind of unusual. Yeah, born and bred, actually second generation. So that's
Wow.
unusual.
Yeah.
Because most of you have moved to Tennessee. I don't know why, but it's
you're right.
great. It's great for property values. That's for sure. Because it's
quite an exodus to Tennessee. But I'm a born and bred Valley girl. I love it. My kids grew up here. I grew up here. Everything. So we're good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I loved hearing the story, and I can't remember if you guys were talking about it live. It may have been at VO Atlanta, and Cliff was talking about you being a little girl and all this stuff, and that was the coolest story.
But not a little girl, but I love him for saying that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Age, but yeah, he used to be in LA, and my studio. I had a studio in Studio City, and he worked at a studio just a few blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was helping cast. It was like a version of Teddy Ruxpin. Remember that talking there? And it was a whole game. And then there was like these talking speed cars. It was just a whole bunch of toys, and we did it out of his studio. So that's when I first met him.
Ah, okay.
That would have been
cool.
Early 90s somewhere.
Now, was that your foray into this type of work, or where did it go from there?
My foray. Well, I grew up in the industry, and I was a kid actor. I did a lot of on-camera commercials. My dad was a television producer. And when I graduated college, I got a job. I didn't want to continue being an actor necessarily. I was a little worried about that. And I got a job as an assistant agent to Don Pitts, who was the guy that started the whole business of voiceover agenting. And he taught me everything about voiceover agenting and had amazing clients, the who's who of voiceover back then. And so I kind of worked my way up and then became a voiceover agent, but I didn't love agenting as much. And then I got an opportunity to get into casting at the Voice Caster in Burbank. And I fell in love with casting. And that's, this was, again, pay to plays and internet and all that stuff. So it was amazing. We cast everything all day long, casting.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1990, I thought, well, I could do this on my own. And I opened up Voices voice casting and have had that ever since.
Awesome. And you also coach, do workshops, go to conferences, stay very busy being involved in the industry. And that is a secondary task, but something that you are very good at as well. We ran a mock audition in our Facebook group a while back, and it gained me so much respect for what you guys do.
Big time.
And we tried to keep it simple, name the file like this, real simple, don't process it, just send us good raw audio. And here's the thing. And, out of 40 people, we'd get 6 or 8 that put female instead of male. They'd hit wouldn't change it in the thing, and they, didn't have it spaced right, or they'd add the date to the end of the file name. So what's the number one pet peeve for you?
You just nailed it right there. They don't pay attention to the directions.
Mm-hmm.
I've said this before, and I really mean it, because we're, as casting directors, we're on your side. I'm not a pay to play. I get hired and paid by an ad agency or a production company to find their voice. They did not go to the pay to plays for free and just, throw the net out. They hired somebody. So there's not that it's better, but it's definitely more hand holding and more attention and honoring kind of our expertise. I mean, I've been doing this over 30 years. So I know voices, I know talent all over the world. So I'm on your side. So I've spent the time talking to that ad agency producer, just dissecting that script and every little thing that they give me as far as the specs go. And maybe you have a celebrity prototype, or what if this and that? And because I want to get hired again by them, I want
Mhm.
to find that voice. So I'm on your side. So I try to be really explicit in the casting specs, but not get. I don't like to bombard actors with too much information.
Mhm.
Um, so I always kind of get like, God, why did you veer off that far when I was on your side? I'm trying to help you. You
Right.
Right.
know, if
Right.
I have the time or I know the actor, I can call them or send them an email like, hey, can you redo this for me because you missed this or that, or shoot a note to their agent and say
Mhm.
that. But sometimes we don't. And what's interesting? Not too long ago, I kind of did a little study here at the office, and I figured out as long as I've been casting, I don't care if I'm calling in 100 people or 600 people, it never fails. Usually 65 to 75% of the people are not right or didn't read the directions right or didn't do anything special in their audition. It
Mhm.
never wavered from that. It's fascinating to me. So it just goes to show you it's not that hard. Just read the
Mhm.
directions.
Right.
You know,
Right.
read the how to label it. Don't slate if we don't want to slate.
Mhm.
Don't do an accent if we didn't ask for an accent. You know, and I'm also known as kind of a casting director that also likes to kind of throw in a few ringers in there and surprises, but I'll go out and ask you for that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's supposed to be collaborative. I want you to get the job. So like
Right.
let's help
Right.
each other out
Right.
that way.
Yeah, we were blown away. The three of us went through the whole process, and and the funny part was when it got down to the end, we picked a top three, and I think all three of us picked the same three people out
Oh,
of the 30,
interesting. Yeah.
which was kind of really odd. I thought we'd be way off,
Yeah.
but it was fun. It was a very educational thing, and it'll give you a respect for what people go through. And you have said this in workshop that I came to, that after you hear 35 times the first four words said the same way, you're just waiting, somebody please.
But I tell the actors, I'm like, you have to remember, and I mean it very respectfully, but you all sound the same. You all sound the same to me because you fit the specs. That's why you got
Right.
the.
Yeah.
That's
So
Mhm.
gonna happen.
basically, in one way, shape, or form, you're all going to pretty much sound the same to us.
Mhm.
And so it's what you do, especially on that first line or two, that's going to make me want to, shortlist you.
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
it's that simple. Sometimes and not like 90% of the time, it has nothing to do with your voice.
Hmm.
It's really how
Right.
you take that copy and make it your own.
Right. Now, all of us have had coaching with different people, and we hear a lot of different things from different coaches. And I don't think there's a right or wrong sometimes, but we have one coach, and I've coached with him for quite a while. And you're going to know who this is when I say it, but we're not going to talk about him. But he tells you, F the specs, be you, just do you, F the specs, and that's hard to do because sometimes you've got to read all that and know what they're asking for. But a lot of times they don't really, it doesn't end up getting cast exactly that way. So thus the thing for multiple takes, I assume.
Um, that's a really good point you brought up because um, part of what that's coaches or what you're saying or what their attack is or whatever is true in the sense that yeah, F the specs, put your own stamp on it, but in my opinion, still respect the specs, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
you might have missed something really important in the specs where they said, okay, midway, we want you to suddenly get very introspective and whatever. And if you just, willy nilly didn't look at the specs, you would totally miss that and then blow your audition. So
Hmm.
I agree with the part of like, don't overthink it and do the voice you think you're supposed to do. I always say, just be
Hmm.
you interpreting this direction.
Right.
So it's
Right.
similar to what that person's saying, but at the same time, don't disrespect the specs, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. It
Um,
does.
and, I always say, I never like to hear more than two takes. I just don't have the time. But if you give me a second take, or if it's short enough and you give us a third take, just make sure they're really different. And that
Hmm.
could be as easy as kind of coming at it with a different emotion or changing up the punctuation a little bit. You know, um, there's a lot of kind of easy hacks and tricks you can do to sort of change up your delivery.
Mhm.
Which things I kind of teach in coaching, but sometimes disrespecting and just being like, I'm a lone wolf. This is what I'm going to do. I think is also kind of showing that you're not a team player when it comes to a session.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I
Yeah.
always tell my actors that you have to remember that producer is listening to who's going to be good at the session, who's going to be fun at the session, and make me, the producer, who usually is the director at the session, look like a good director.
Right.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
all a game. It's all a game, and we all have to kind of work with each other.
Sure.
And I always tell the actors, you got to know how to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Jake, Alden, you guys jump in now. I don't
Oh,
want to.
no, it's fine. You've asked great questions, and I've definitely wanted to hear the answers. Now, just to kind of touch real quick on maybe those multiple takes kind of thing. Now, I've run into breakdowns where they ask for, give us 1 to 2 takes or 2 to 3 takes on the same MP3. If those directions aren't explicitly in there, and they're also not saying, don't give us multiple takes, do you prefer someone say something like, hey, I got 2 takes for you before it starts? Because I've heard people talk about too, like, if they hear anything other than the script, they just move on,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, I mean, I think that depends on who's giving you the audition. The way I will write a spec, I'm very explicit, and I'll say, we want to hear 2 takes. You don't have to say in your slate, this is Jake with 2 takes. Take
Mhm.
1, bada, 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 take 2. Um, I'm a big fan of the no slate, and I just say, just butt your take 2 right up against the end of take 1. So just in case I'm reaching to turn it off, you
Something
come
catches
in
you.
there. Uh, or sometimes we'll say in the labeling of your file, your name or the character name or whatever it is, and then underscore 2 takes or something like that.
Okay.
So um, I think probably the smartest way to do it is just make sure your takes are butted up very, very close to each other so they get heard.
Okay. That
Um,
makes sense, and
yeah,
that's smart too,
Mhm.
because that way, if they do hear it, since if they are back to back like that, they'll maybe hear something
yeah.
that'll make them pause.
Yeah, and it's kind of the rule of thumb, not that there are any rules in voiceover because there aren't, but sort of like an understanding, I guess, is that if it's a 15-second spot, yeah, 2 to 3 takes is kind of cool, because it's short. But if it's a 30-second, 1 to 2 takes is good. 60-second, 1 is enough,
Right.
So use your best judgment.
Yeah, because
Well,
how
once,
often, if it is
yeah.
like a 60-second spot, how often do you listen to the whole thing? I mean, I guess you only listen if something catches your
Yeah,
ear.
I mean, again, I've been doing this so long. I just kind of know, like, okay, I heard the first paragraph. Okay, great,
Hmm.
shortlist them or dump it. Um, it depends on my client because I always ask the client, okay, you got a 60-second spot here. Do you want them to read the whole thing? Or do you only want them to read, 30 seconds of it? And I'll
Hmm.
put that in the specs. You only need to read 30 seconds of it. So if the actor doesn't read that or doesn't respect that, I'm like, oh, he doesn't follow directions. Bummer.
Hmm.
Yeah. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
so what you guys have to realize too is casting directors, the whole casting industry has changed so much in the last, 5 to 10 years maybe, where their budgets are smaller. My clients, most of the clients I work with, they don't want me to send more than 10 to 20 uh, picks. I might get, I'll throw the net out and get like 200, 300 auditions, but I got to keep paring that down. So, they have like zero patience. They just want to hear my top 10 picks or top 12 picks, and then they'll pick who they want.
Hmm.
So do everything you can to just show you're following direction and that you're going to stand out.
Hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
answer your question? I think.
That
That
does.
totally
No,
I
makes
think so,
absolutely
sense.
it
yeah.
does. And it also
Yeah.
honestly answered a question I was going to ask too about, as far as how you break down what you actually send to the client. So, but that pretty much answers my question when you were
Yeah, I
talking
mean,
about.
it's the process I have is, okay, so say I'm just casting one role, and again, it always depends on the casting budget too, because casting budgets, like I said, have gotten much smaller. And then they'll I'll throw the net out to either agents and talent that don't have agents, whoever's right for the spot. And then my process is, okay, say I get 300 auditions back on the first round, I'm only listening to your first line. maybe the second line. Then I narrow that down to like my top 50. Then I'll go and listen to those guys' top a whole reads. And then
Sure.
narrow that down to like my top 20, 25, pick my top 10, 12, and send that on to the client. And then I kind
Wow.
of keep those other ones, sometimes I'll throw in extra ones as a bonus, or I'll kind of keep them just in case the client comes back and says, I didn't hear the right person. And I'll say, oh, well, I've got these other guys.
Okay.
Take a listen to these guys.
So you have like a backup
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
initial.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty
Okay.
neat.
I am
Pretty neat.
curious with the directions you get from your client, and maybe they have the celebrity prototype, but they give instructions on kind of what they're looking for. If you see conflicting ideas, do you kind of narrow that down because you know in your mind where they're going? So you kind of hone that in, and when you send out your auditions, you have a little more streamlined explanation of what the directions are.
Yeah, that's a good question too, because sometimes, I have some clients that are like newer working with me, and that's why I say I really try to pick apart. And what happens sometimes is, oh, okay, Mary Lynn, this is the producer, and this is what I'm thinking. But let me have you talk to the copywriter. And then I talk to the copywriter, and he's chiming in. And then, oh, there's another copywriter. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then, oh, the client just called. They're thinking blah 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 blah.
yeah,
So I'm trying to kind of glean the main idea. And then usually, even sometimes before I send that out to my talent, I might go back to that producer and say, hey, just to confirm, kind of talking to all of you, this is what I got. What do you think? Oh, great. Or yeah, don't forget to say they have to have a raspy voice, or whatever it is.
yeah.
So I like I was saying earlier, I want them to hire me again, so
Right.
I'm trying to make sure I'm covering everybody's, request, and also then chiming in on my own too, because sometimes they just don't know things,
Sure.
they
Yeah.
don't know that, well, if you're going to ask for somebody that does a lot of character voices, that person might not be great at a spokesy voice or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What a perfect point being there's no, as you said earlier, there's no correctness or there's no set rules or anything, because you're right. You can talk to 5 different casting folks and you're going to get I like it this way, or I'd rather have it that way.
Yeah, yep.
But it is some good generalities that people need to keep in mind. And the big one is follow the freaking directions.
Yeah.
Just that easy. I
And
think
what's funny about that mock audition we did? I'm pretty sure you even explicitly said in there, everyone, please read and follow the instructions. And then you
Yes,
still
it's true.
get people that didn't
Yeah.
do it. And it's just like, why is this not connecting? Like,
Yeah.
that's the only thing that ever made sense to me was like follow the instructions, because I want my chances of being heard. That's all I ask. I
Right.
just want my audition
Right.
listened to. I mean, sure, I'd love to be shortlisted. I'd love to book it, but the best chance of me getting heard is following the instructions.
Yeah, right. And putting
Right.
your stamp on it. And, kind of what I was saying again earlier too, with talking about that other coach you're mentioning, I find a lot of times, you even if you didn't get any direction, because sometimes we get those auditions where I have a couple of ad agency producers I work with, and I don't know if they're just kind of masochists, but they purposefully do not give specs because they want to see what the actor's going to do with it. But you can usually glean from the copy what kind of read there is. You can tell, and what I teach in my coaching is there are 5 directions that are the foundation for all commercials. It has never strayed. That's how advertising works. So you can usually tell, oh, this is a real person because there's personal pronouns in there. You can usually tell it's a snarky wry read because it's all smartass. There's things you can tell.
Mhm.
But then again, sometimes, yeah, we do get that copy that's horribly written and, no specs. It's like, okay, I'm just going to kind of figure out this is how I would say this.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and in his defense, he does say, after you've done the spot or you've recorded it, then go back and look and see, is that what they're kinda looking for? I think what he's saying is on the front end, interpret the copy first and see which you needs to read this, which, and get into the point of view and the perspective, and then put your spin on it, and then go back and look. And if you're that far off, then maybe you need to make a change in it. But
yeah, there's a very well-known Charlie Adler is you guys probably a very well-known animation director, voice talent, Emmy winning, director. And he did a workshop with us years and years ago, and he was talking about how he was trying to do more commercials. And gosh, this was probably like 10 years ago. And he said, I just like threw the specs out and I would just grab the copy and go in and do my first thing based on what I thought it was. And then I'd go back and look at the specs. So it's kind of exactly what you're saying. This person said,
Mm-hmm.
I'd go back and look at the specs and then my interpretation. And he said, 90% of the time I was right. Because again, the copy's written that way. Where I find the discrepancy usually comes is, we love, well, I can't say I love pay to plays, but the pay to play world, it's mostly, as like to say, kind of mom and pop shops that are not theatrically minded or, actor centric, if you will. So they don't know how to, articulate maybe the needs or the acting words or, directions. So everything is just be yourself, or you're talking to your best friend and things like that. And then the first word is introducing, so it's
Yes.
it's sort of like,
Jeez, I hate
you
that
have
How
word.
many times?
to find your space in that world. I know
Right.
it's
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
little vague, but that's sort of where to go with that.
All right, so off topic here.
Mhm.
All right, it's Saturday. What does Mary Lynn like to go do on the weekend?
Well, this weekend for the next 4 weeks, I'm teaching a class with Lori Allen, so there goes my Saturday. It'll be super
Work.
fun. I mean, she's a hoot. So that'll be fun. But usually, what do I do on a Saturday? I sleep in if I can, but
Yes.
Yeah.
but for me, sleeping in is like 8 o'clock. So
Right
I
there
like,
with you.
yeah, I just can't. I mean, ever since my kids were little, um, it's that inner clock. I'm always got up at 6 to get them ready for school, and they're in their
Right.
20s, so I have no excuse. Um, so typically I will, like, sometimes I'll have plans with friends or see my daughters, or, I have a new little granddaughter, so I see her,
Oh,
or, clean the house.
right.
When it comes up, get that vacuum out, do all that stuff. I'm kind of a clean freak, get the laundry going. Yeah, it just kind of depends what's going on, socially or just, around my neighborhood. Like I said, I live in LA, and so we always have beautiful weather. So
Yeah.
I'm a big outdoors person, and I like to play tennis. So
Oh,
Oh,
that's
cool.
awesome.
try to do stuff.
Tennis.
Yeah, yeah.
Haven't tried pickleball yet?
I know I haven't, and I remember playing it a little bit in high school, but I was always such a tennis snob. I was afraid it was going to wreck my tennis game.
Oh,
I had so many friends that are like, "No, no, you got to do it. You got to do it." And I have a mean backhand, and I'm always afraid, like, can I do that with a pickleball, like the two-handed backhand? So
just launch it.
the
Yeah, my
things that
my
go through
mom and
my
dad.
head.
Yeah.
My mom and dad would not let me play golf in high school because of my baseball. They
Oh
said
yeah,
it'll ruin your baseball
Oh,
swing.
yeah.
yeah. I could.
And then a coach had us hitting off a tarp, and it tore the cartilage out of my knee, and that ruined it all. So it
Oh
didn't
no!
matter.
Oh no!
Yeah, yeah, things like that happen. That was one
Yeah,
of those career-changing moments.
yeah. Yikes! Yikes!
Yep, lots of fun. So I don't want to get into deep specifics, but I know your coaching methods by coming to the workshop at VO Atlanta and enjoyed that a ton. And I know I've coached with you once individually, but the encouragement of getting people to get in front of casting people, whether in workshops or wherever they can, so they can see them and hear them. I think that's highly important
Oh,
to
yeah.
get associated that way. And I think people miss out on that. What's your input on some of
Oh,
that?
I totally agree. It's not only are you just getting in front of them and they get to know you so that, for future projects, because every student I've ever worked with, I put in our database and, I'll make notes, this is their voice, was their strength, or, he's in Texas or he's in Missouri, whatever. Um, so it's not only getting in front of them, because again, that's our job, is to always find voices, but also we're in the trenches. So I know what books. I know why there's certain actors that just always get a booking. What is it about them? So I teach that. I like to teach not only, like I said earlier, the foundation, but then I take it a step further and then, teach you how to apply those foundations, because every actor is going to have a little bit of a different MO to get into them. Um, and it is about the acting. It really is. So for me, it's not like I'm manipulating, but I'm working with you so that you will then ultimately learn how to stand out on an audition. Because I
Right.
know,
That's very
I know what's
important.
trending. I know, like I said earlier, I know why certain actors always get booked. Um, I know, what's happening in the advertising world because I work with ad agency producers and account execs, all week long. Um, and again, not just commercials too. I mean, we cast narrations and all kinds of things, games, animation. So, the relationships that I have, help actors. Just the other day, I had a client from Brazil. We don't have time to cast. Can you just give me the names of 3 teenage boys that can sound 16-year-old? Great. I sent them off the name of 3 of my students, and they just booked
Mm-hmm.
it because they
Mm-hmm.
trust me. So, um, there's some wonderful casting folks out there that coach. And I think, again, it's just good to be on the radar of a buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I know part of that kind of was leading to the point of, the NAVA survey tells us there's this huge amount of percentage of people making 20 to 40,000 a year in VO, 80% or so of the people that responded. The difference in that 80% and that other 20% is exactly that. It is the coaching and the ability to act and to do those things. We all have been told, "Oh, I really like your voice." Well, that gets you nowhere. What can you do with that voice? I mean, can you really make that voice change character and be believable and get different point of views in situations? And that is what you'll learn in that type coaching. So our newer people out there, those people, what Jake, you had one the other week that posted on there something about I'm new and da 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 da. And what they say, this strike's going on, so I guess I should give up now. And they
Yeah,
hadn't
they
even
weren't even in. They
started.
weren't even in voiceover yet, and they're like,
Yeah,
"So I think about getting into voiceover, but since the strike's going on, am I pretty much screwed?"
yeah. One had nothing to do with the other, but
The
Yeah.
strike has nothing to do with commercials,
yeah,
Right. Exactly.
exactly. That's what we were trying to get across to them. But we get to run into that in our group a lot, and
A lot of different groups too. I mean,
yeah,
new people
true,
all the time come in
true.
without doing any research, and they just go straight. So how do I get into cartoons?
Yeah,
Not by posting in this
yeah,
group.
yeah,
Yeah, this is not the place.
yeah.
Yeah.
Research, research, research. Learn.
Really, it's daunting. I mean, during the pandemic, I was getting calls from, parents of kids that my kids went to school with, hey, Mary Lynn, I remember you do this thing on voiceover, and well, I'm home now, and I want to give it a try. I got a good voice. It's like, okay, first you're going to need to go take lessons. It's going to cost you about this much. Then you're going to need to get a website, and demos is going to cost you this much, and then a booth, and then what? They have no
Mm-hmm.
clue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, the calls we get every week, well, I've been in radio for 80 years and I could do this and that. And it's just, okay, go get training. The best investment you
Yeah.
can make is to start with a reputable coach or a good beginning workshop is get the training. Get at least get in front of the mic and see if you have the talent. Because
Yeah.
that's again, nothing to do with your voice.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you could have the most
Yeah.
gorgeous voice on the planet, but if you can't perform, you're no good to us. We always kind of make a joke around here when we're casting a celebrity spot or campaign. Voiceover to me is the true delineator between who's a really good actor and who's just pretty, because you get some of these celebrities in the booth, and when they start doing a voiceover, they're very humbled, like, oh crap, I'm just reading. They don't realize it's acting, and they'll say, okay, let's try it again. Can you do this, and that? And then they start to melt down, and it's very intense. Some of the diva moments we have seen. So, when you think about it, that's why there's only like a really good handful of celebrities that are successful at voiceover. And I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
commercials, not the
Mm-hmm.
animation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it really is about acting and taking a piece of advertising where you're selling something and
Mm-hmm.
making it sound like it was a snippet of your life. It's hard
Yeah.
to do.
I love the video that was going around. It might have been last year or 2 years ago of Sam Elliott in a VO session, and they'd ask him, "Could you give us one more line?" And he says, "It
Hero.
ain't going to sound no different."
That was from a movie. I watched that movie.
Was it?
Yeah,
It,
it was
it
really
was. That was a real neat thing because you could tell he was just getting madder and madder and madder.
one trick pony there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love
Yeah.
hearing Mark Hamill talk about voice actors versus.
Oh, I love Mark Hamill.
Oh yeah. He talks about how the bar is so high in voice acting. When he went into his first voice acting session, he was intimidated. This is Luke Skywalker, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick, and this is, I mean, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, I guess, but I mean, I know you've been in the industry for so long, but and you're used to probably working with celebrities in certain situations. Has there ever been a celebrity you've gotten to work with that you were like kind of maybe fangirling over the fact? I mean, like, you obviously kept your reservation, but I mean, like, you work with them all the time, so maybe the allure isn't there anymore. But I mean,
A little bit like it's weird because I not to sound like pompous or anything. I grew up in the industry,
right?
like I said, my
Yeah.
dad was a television producer, so I was around like sets and things like that when I was a kid. But at the same time, when you meet certain idols of yours, or actors you just really love, I, like I did get a little, I mean, I directed Orson Welles once,
Oh man.
I directed,
Wow.
I directed Casey Kasem. I've directed June Foray. I've directed Richard Chamberlain, Jeff Bridges, Jason Bateman. I've directed some really great actors. And again, there's something about, I can't explain it, but I think voice talent get it. Like you get in the booth and you're in your little cocoon and they get in there and they're just as vulnerable as any actor, as any,
Yeah.
scaled voice actor.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, I won't say who, were really nasty
I'm sure.
because they were realizing in the moment that they weren't getting it, you know, and then some were incredibly, kind and vulnerable and sort of like, help me through this, which I found very endearing, and then I wanted to help them. But yeah, I think I fangirled over Jeff Bridges because that
I'm
was just
sure.
kinda like, "Hi, here's your coffee."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Get
That's
a little
awesome.
like,
dude.
I mean, he's just who he is, and
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, there was, I've always missed George Clooney coming in and out of the booth, like, I don't know why, but not for me, but he was at the studio I work out of in Studio City sometimes. He would come in really early in the morning to do looping sessions there, and I would come in and the person would go, "Ah, you just missed George." I'm like, "No!" The booth smelled so good.
Of course. Of course.
That's kind
Smelled
of
George, but
some
not
of the similarities of
Yeah.
like living in Nashville, and being around the music industry when I was
God, yeah.
younger.
I go
And it was nothing to walk in a place and there's, Garth in there at the pancake pantry having breakfast
Yeah.
and at the time I was so backward, I wouldn't go over there and say anything, but the guy I was with kind of reminds me of Charles Coates. He just walks over and kicks up a conversation. "Hey, I heard your new song on the radio." And this was, when Garth maybe had 2 songs out. And he was just the nicest, most humble person, and it's really neat to meet those people like that. But some of the worst, and I traveled with these people for a short time. Sadly, one of the meanest people I was ever around was Porter Wagner.
Oh,
Oh.
really?
Yeah, and I don't know if he was just having a couple bad days, or what it was, but yeah. But I've met a lot of really nice people though.
Yeah. It's not hard to be nice,
Right.
No, it's not. What does our friend Jen
We're
Henry
all
say?
the same thing, it's
It
like,
costs-
let's
yeah.
just have fun.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it costs so little to be nice.
Yeah,
You gain
it
so
really
much.
does. Well,
Yeah.
Mary Lynn, let's get information out there for how people can get in touch with you, especially for the coaching is what we're talking about. If they want to reach out, do you vet people before you coach them, or do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I personally only like to work with working pros. I I just kind of don't have the patience right now to do the beginners.
Sure.
This is your mic, handstand. Um,
Right.
so I work with a working pro level talent, and then one of my casting associates here, Caitlin, she'll work with the beginners.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Gotcha.
Well,
so
that's still good.
yeah, she's really great at that, and she also coaches the kids. So yeah, I work with mostly like intermediate to working pro level people, and then we also have our VO Pros classes, which are events we've been doing for about 12 years, where it's usually like Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and we'll have a guest. Like this week was all about dubbing. So the other night we had Ezra Weiss. Tonight we have Jeff Howell, and so we get casting directors, whether it's video games, promos. We'll have agent nights. So all kinds of things, narration, whatever. And so
Mhm.
if somebody wants to look into that, it's thevopros.com. And
VOpros.com.
then to reach me and my casting, it's just you can go to my website, voicesvoicecasting.com, or voicesvoicecasting@gmail. It's one long word. And yeah.
Awesome.
And then I'm
Awesome.
always at like VO Atlanta. I love going there.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I'll do a event somewhere else. But yeah, I'm kind of around.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I know, like all of you that are in this business, it's roller coastery. Some days we're over swamped and under swamps, but I do really appreciate you taking time to talk to us. This is
Yes.
It's been awesome.
it is. It's
Thank
been
you.
great. We've enjoyed it, and I know that I will see you in Atlanta. I don't know about these other two guys, and it looks like I'm going to get to speak at One Voice, so I'll get to go to Texas. I'm excited about that. I haven't been to One Voice yet, so
Yeah, I went a couple years ago. It was fun. Yeah, come to VO Atlanta. It's a fun event. It's kind of a little overwhelming because there's
Right.
just so much going on.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's our peeps.
Yeah.
So everybody, you don't meet anybody there that doesn't love voiceover.
right,
So we
right,
all have something in common, and it's so nice just to see people because we're just stuck in our little booths all day. So it's so nice to,
Right.
like kiss people and
absolutely.
hug and say, yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and it's so nice getting to know you guys. So
Yeah, the pleasure's been ours, and it's
Yes,
been great
ours
talking with
indeed.
you. It's a
Yeah,
great
100,
let's give
insight.
her a
100 thank
hand.
yous.
Let's give her a big
Woo!
hand on the way out. Thank you so much.
All these
So
pops
good,
going
so
on the
good.
microphone. People
yeah,
in